Greetings, students. Thank you for attending this class. Today we'll be discussing the basics of gender and then applying it to the issue of masculinity, as we've been doing this week, studying the Kimmel and Hearn chapter, Changing Studies on Men and Masculinities. This is a YouTube video which we will be uploading for the class, and it'll be a public YouTube video, so it's part of the OER, Open Educational Resources project in the Faculty of Political Science at NDU, Faculty of Law and Political Science at NDU. Before we get started, let's first of all consider, as we have in the past several weeks, what does gender actually mean? What is the difference between gender and sex? And as we've discussed in the past, sex is the biological distinction between male and female, which is universal, which is basically a worldwide phenomenon. And secondly is the issue of gender, which is highly embedded, highly dependent upon cultural, class, religious, etc. Situations of the respective person and culture and society. So when we compare Western discourse, or Western discussions on the concept of gender, to those in the Middle East, we have to realize that not only are we dealing with two different realities, i.e. that of the Middle East and the West, but we're also using the terminology which has been developed in the West, which has been developed in the global North, as we'll be discussing in a moment, to apply it to our region, the Middle East and North Africa, or as we're going to be calling it, the MENA region. So, gender is social sex, if you will. Gender is being male or being female in the context of the Middle East, in our case, or in the context of Lebanon, or more specifically, in the context of a student in the political science department in the Faculty of Law and Political Science at Notre Dame University. So, gender. Now, what is masculinity? Masculinity, we are going to discuss, as Rowan Connell has proposed in Southern theory, from a northern and a southern perspective, from the global North and from the global South. So the global North is a concept which would sound almost as unusual, as non-normal, as masculinity itself. We're used to talking about the southern perspective, the perspective of dependency, this assumed inferiority. The South as in the concept of gender, of femininity. Feminist or women's studies developed out of an emancipatory need to question the assumption that being male is normal and being female is abnormal, and Southern theory was developed similarly to question the assumption that being from the North is normal and being from the South is abnormal, as we've discussed before, the concept of as long as lions don't have their own historians, the history of hunting will always glorify the hunter. So, what is the global North and what is the global South? Just to set the stage. The global North, as in the concept of masculinity, are existing assumptions about how things are according to the norms or the standards in science. Not only the reality that we live in, but also the scientific parameters that we use. So in this class, we're not only questioning whether masculinity is normal, we're also, for the first time, actually discussing it. So the male students in this class have a double journey to ahead of them, which is to not only learn a lot about gender studies, but also question the assumption that the way they see the world is normal, something that most female students will not have to do. Interestingly enough, the same thing would apply to the North and the South, the global North, assuming, and this is something that we have to deal with in more depth during the semester, is being from the South abnormal? Edward Said, for example, in his book on Orientalism, questions the assumptions that the Orient is what the global North calls it or assumes it to be, but the global North would never see itself as the North. That's something we'll also be dealing with. So the assignment for this week, and this is the purpose of this brief introduction, is to look at Kimmel and Hearn's Changing Studies on Men and Masculinities, which we've uploaded in the Facebook page for the course and on Blackboard, and to take a step past what we did last week. Last week we looked at Haywood's Ideologies, a textbook which I use in my ideologies class, and we took the chapter on feminism as an ideology and talked about the three waves of feminist thinking. Then we took Rita Stefan's book, or chapter if you will, from the internet and uploaded it in the chapter, and she talks about four waves. I'm not going to go over that here, but what you did last week was to compare the three-wave theory from Haywood as a global north viewpoint or perspective on gender from a feminist perspective or from a women's studies perspective, and Rita Stefan's four waves from a Lebanese perspective. And what I'd like you to do for this week is now take that dichotomy, global north, south, that we've applied to femininity and to feminism and to women's studies, and now apply it to masculinity and men's studies. So the assignment will be to read the entire 30 pages as have been uploaded for the last week, or actually 2 weeks, in the Facebook group Gender Studies at NDU, and then to contemplate, can we do the same thing for men in masculinity that we've done for women? I'm not going to go through the chapter. That will be the assignment of the students. I would like Group A to do the presentation on Thursday. That will be in class. So first of all, we'll have a presentation from Group A for the class around 10 to 12 minutes. Then you'll be watching this video. And then what you'll be doing in your 4 groups, actually in your 3 groups, Group B, C, and D will have one member from Group A in their group respectively and contemplate. There's no right or wrong here. Can we apply a global south, which would be Rita Stefan, and a global north, which would be Andrew Haywood's approach to femininity? Can we apply that to masculinity? And here we need, of course, the insights, the effectiveness, the subjectivity of both female and male students. What does it mean to be male in the Middle East? Is it different than being male in Europe or North America? And the last point that you might want to look at before you come to class on Thursday is another reference that I've uploaded, which is Robert Bly's book, Iron John. So if you have time to look at that, we'll be reading sections of this book. Robert Bly's a poet. If you have time to have a look at even the Wikipedia entry on this, it really goes into depth on what it means to be male, of course again from a global north perspective. So, I wish you success in today's class, today being the 1st of October. It's a 9:30 class, and I'll be seeing you next Tuesday. Wishing you all the best from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, Eugene Sensenig-Dabbous. Thank you.